On today's show, for the Cavs to get where they want to go next year, Evan Mobley's got to be a big part of it, and Kenny Atkinson needs to help get him there. I've got Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and Cleveland Cavaliers on SI to talk about it all on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star review. Help us to grow the show. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs. If you're watching this video right now, click that thumbs up button for me. Make sure you are subscribed. And click the notification bell as well. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more this summer as FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello again, everybody. I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. Brought a special guest in today, Spencer German, with me. You know him from being a coworker of mine at 92.3 The Fan. Also covers the Cavs for Sports Illustrated. Today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Evan Mobley. And Spencer, one of the things that you and I have talked about is how for the Cavs to get to where they want to go this year, which I think it's fair to say this is a team with relatively high expectations, they need to get a lot out of Evan Mobley. They need to get more out of Evan Mobley offensively than they've gotten in years past. And Kenny Atkinson's going to be a big part of that. So I do wonder, from your perspective, what exactly do you think you need to see from Mobley going into this season for the Cavs to maximize him?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question, and we know how much, this season and the future of this franchise revolves around the development of Mobley and Kenny Atkinson. He didn't shy away from that in his introductory press conference, over a month and a half or so ago when he was brought in, and you and I were there to hear him sort of talk about it. He flat out said, that was a big part of the conversation he had with the Cavaliers front office was, hey, how can you take his game to the next level? And what's interesting to me is, like, a year ago, Danny, I was saying something different about Mobley in terms of where he needed to go, take that next step. Like, I was kind of picturing – I don't like using comparisons to other players because then it sets this unrealistic bar sometimes, right? But I was kind of
Duncan,
picturing –
Kevin Garnett, Hakeem Olajuwon. You just want to compare him to more all-time greats?
Exactly. Like, I kind of envisioned, like, him becoming, like, that role that Giannis is, where he's not shooting a lot of threes, but he's attacking the basket. Offense runs through him. Like, that was kind of what I put out there into the ether as this can be his game and he can still be really successful at the NBA level. But I think the problem is with this team, and assuming that the Cavaliers at this point, it sure looks like they are going to run it back with the same, core four of guys that they have. You have some redundancies in terms of Mobley trying to play that type of style while you have Jared Allen also on the floor with him at the same time. So I do think this year is about him sort of expanding his game beyond the three-point arc, being able to knock down threes more consistently. I liked the fact that towards the end of last season, after he got back from the injury, it was evident that JB Bickerstaff at the time, tried to push him to do that a little bit more. And he shot a decent clip. He was trying to percentage-wise, I think it was around like 35% for the season, something like that. But he wasn't shooting them at a high volume. And I think that's the thing you're going to see change is I think Atkinson is going to try to get him to do that even more. And I do think that's something that the Cavaliers need, given that him and Jared Allen have to find a way to coexist. And I don't think Jared Allen's going to be that guy who's shooting threes for you, obviously.
Right. I will say, I do think Jared Allen's going to shoot some threes. It's not going to be a high volume. Like, I would still expect it to be less than one a game. But he did take like 0.6 three-pointers a game under Kenny Atkinson in Brooklyn. So that's just something to worth monitoring. But I don't think that's some, offensively altering statistic. Last year, Mobley, he only took 1.2 threes a game. He shot 37%, which is great. But no one's going to respect you, not because you can't shoot, but because you don't shoot. It's the same thing that we talk about all the time with Isaac Okoro. He shoots fine. He just needs to shoot it more, right? I'm glad you brought up the Giannis comp. Because that is one, and I think that Evan Mobley sort of has maybe 2 or 3 paths he can take offensively. One of them is expanding that game out beyond the three-point arc and being someone that can stretch the floor. Another one is going down the Giannis track where, yeah, Giannis is an MVP, and it is incredibly unfair to Evan to compare him or expect him to turn into that. But what if he's got a similar skill set, which I think it's a fair thing to say, and your goal is to get Evan Mobley to offensively become like 85% of what Giannis is? Would that be enough? Would that be enough to elevate this offense, considering, yeah, Giannis at 100% is an MVP. 85% of Giannis, that might be a third-team All-NBA guy, and that also wouldn't necessarily have to be the best player on this roster because of Donovan Mitchell. So I do think it's a really interesting conversation as far as what you would value more. Would you want him to really go all in on the getting stronger, bulking up the way Giannis did? Because you look at what Giannis looked like 3 years into his career, just physically,
yeah,
it's pretty similar to what Evan Mobley looks like. They've got a very similar build. I don't know if Evan can put on as much weight and muscle as Giannis did, but I love that you brought that up because I think it's a very interesting avenue that he could end up going down.
Yeah, and I think he can be successful that way still in this league. And that's the other interesting part of this, Danny, because we know there's been a lot of trade talk this offseason. Maybe not from the Cavs specifically, who it seems like have been very, committal to we're bringing back Jared Allen. We love Jared Allen, and they obviously just gave him the extension a couple weeks ago now, so they're committing to him. But like, we don't know what the future holds for this group and what parts and pieces could be moved at some point. And if at some point they decide, well, okay, we now know, even with Kenny Atkinson taking over, that there's maybe just a little bit too much of a redundancy with Mobley and Allen playing on the floor together, then you're now maybe asking Evan Mobley to change his game again back to that type of style. So that's what's kind of interesting here too, is like, well, if you make him a 3-point shooter more so this year, how does that stunt then his ability to get back to the style that we're talking about with Giannis down the road? I would think he'd still be able to get there, but it might just take him a little bit longer to do that. So yeah, it's fascinating. And I do think he can still be successful that way. I just wonder what that looks like with this iteration of the Cavs, because we know like the thing that they are lacking is 3-point shooting. And if you have two bigs that haven't really shown they can spread the floor, space the floor for you, that can be problematic. But the thing I'll say this, I'm encouraged by the fact, and I love this point that I bring this up all the time because I love this point so much. Kenny Atkinson, he gets the credit for turning Al Horford into Al Horford. I mean, Al Horford has extended his career and now wins an NBA championship with the Celtics this year because he somehow late in his career found a way to knock down threes. Brook Lopez, same thing. He's an NBA champion because he went and joined Giannis and became that extra big. Like in theory, like him and Giannis would have been redundant with his own, like we're talking about here with Mobley and Allen, with the style he played before. But because he's able to knock down threes, now he gives you that extra element. So I that's the thing that I kind of keep going back to, that has me really, really encouraged for what Atkinson's going to be able to do with Mobley, and why I also do think we're going to see him do that more, and that maybe is the direction he leans this season. And then I guess if they decide at some point that they can't coexist and they move off of Allen, maybe then he kind of goes back the other direction and he swings back towards playing some more of that Giannis style.
Yeah, and I do think to the point about having to pick avenues, and I guess I probably lean towards the wanting to extend his game out the way that Kenny Atkinson's big guys have in the past in certain situations he's been in, because I think it's easy, once that's added to your game and once you're respected from the outside the way Al Horford is, and Al Horford's career, he didn't shoot threes until his last year in Atlanta. It was the 2015-16 season, the year the Cavs won the title. They beat the Hawks in the second round of the playoffs that year. Al Horford shot 3.1 threes per game, which right now doesn't sound like a ton. Like, that is not a high volume shooter by any stretch. No. But back then, teams were not firing up 3-pointers nearly at the same rate they are right now. So you do have to adjust for that. That just, that Atlanta Hawks team wasn't taking 45 threes a game the way that average NBA teams are now. And Horford had never taken more than 0.5 threes a game before then. And Brook Lopez's numbers are even more startling, where when he was in Brooklyn, he was an awesome player as a dude that just posted up with his back to the basket, and he was sort of unstoppable there. And then all of a sudden, Kenny Atkinson's first year in Brooklyn, Brook Lopez shoots over 5 threes a game after having never taken, there were years where he didn't take 3-pointers. Like, that is something I do wonder, are the Cavs going to see that sort of jump with Evan Mobley? And what does that jump look like? That is one of the things that I'm most interested in, and that's what we're going to talk about next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. You wouldn't be watching or listening to the show right now if you didn't love sports. And FanDuel's got something for everybody every day, and that something is a boost or a bonus daily. So it's baseball season. There's not a ton else going on, but football, preseason football is here. Regular season football is right around the corner. College football is right around the corner. And FanDuel is making it so much better for you because they're hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. One of the things that I've been talking to you guys about has been the Cleveland Guardians. They won again on Tuesday night, beating the Chicago Cubs. Emmanuel Clase closed out the game, got a save for the 4th consecutive game. Now, I'm not saying Emmanuel Clase is going to win the Cy Young, but Emmanuel Clase should win the Cy Young, and he's plus 10,000 to do so right now on FanDuel. That's great value. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it were up to me, it would happen because I think Emmanuel Clase has been the best pitcher in baseball. So what if Emmanuel Clase only pitches 1 inning a night? He is the most dominant guy with a baseball in his hand on the mound. So that's where I would lean, but FanDuel is the place to go if you've got an inkling just like that one. So head on over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So, Spencer, with the Cavs and Evan Mobley, moving him back away from the basket, I think, one, obviously, that creates so much space. But I do think when you take a look at how his career is going to look, and this core four, the Cavs are obviously very intent on keeping it together this year. They wouldn't have extended all 3 of the guys that they did extend if that weren't the case. But Evan Mobley's not going to play with this specific group of guys forever. That doesn't happen in the NBA, and you're foolish to think so. I don't know who it's going to be that he's going to be playing with 3 to 5 years from now, but I'm willing to bet that all 4 of the core 4 are not on the Cavs 5 years from now. I think it's easier to build a roster around him, and hopefully Donovan Mitchell as well, if he's able to stretch the floor. So when I take a look at the avenues to go down, I lean towards wanting to extend him out. I lean towards wanting to make him into a 3-point shooter. But what I do wonder is, what does that look like? Like, how many attempts are we talking per game? Are we talking about a guy, do you think, that is 5 attempts per game? Is it 7 attempts per game? Is it as good as 4 attempts per game? Like, what's that magic number for you?
I feel like 7's probably too high. I'm kind of picturing something in like the 4 to 5 range, like kind of what you talked about. Horford started out at like 3, and same with Lopez. Like he was barely shooting 3s, and then he kind of jumped up to 5 per game under Kenny Atkinson. I think that's probably what's going to make sense. And like I said, I love this conversation because it is one of the more fascinating things in the NBA that these 2 big men who never had that as part of their arsenal then added it like so late in their careers, and Kenny Atkinson gets credit for that. And like I said, it's something that has me excited about what Evan Mobley's development looks like. But I'm with you, like it has to, because this iteration lacks the 3-point shooting that they have right now, or that they don't have right now, unless I guess, there's a Cam Johnson trade in their future, which maybe that happens at some point. And I think Cavs fans would love that move. I know that's a move I've talked about this offseason. That would be awesome. But unless they add that other threat from outside, I think it has to be Mobley. And I think that's kind of they've been so adamant about him or keeping this group together that I think they're kind of telling you that is their plan. Their plan is to bring that to his game. So yeah, I'm kind of looking, and I feel like somewhere in that 4 to 5 range probably makes sense. And listen, if he's able to do that at that clip and still knock him down around the percentage that he was knocking him down last year, 37%, I think that earns him the respect at least enough where people will step out on him and try to defend him out there, and they won't just leave him open like we saw in the playoffs. Teams are daring it, like the Orlando and the Celtics. They were both daring him to take those threes, and they weren't really falling all the time. Sometimes they did, but they were taking their chances with it. He has to at least prove that it's a threat enough that teams have to step out on him, and then that creates opportunities, obviously, for other people, maybe like Jared Allen underneath the basket. And we also didn't get to see it fully with Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen all together in that Celtics series. But I think I'm kind of looking at that 4 to 5 range is kind of what makes sense, I would think.
Right, and I think it needs to be probably closer to 5 if this is going to work out. Not Evan's career. I don't think his career and how successful he is as a basketball player hinges on this particular thing. But I think for the core 4 to work, that's what hinges on this particular thing. I think that there's not really a better front court defensive duo than he and Jarrett Allen, but the fit offensively, just it needs more space. And I'm not the first person to say that. I'm not going to be the last person to say that. That is a very common point that, Spencer, I'm sure you've heard all the time. I'm sure you've said it all the time. But for this grouping, this pairing to work, I think he's got to be taking 5 threes a game. If he's not, teams are going to continue to defend the Cavs the same way. And sometimes they get bailed out because Donovan Mitchell can put a cape on and be a superhero. But it makes life so much more difficult for him when he has to do that. And that is something that I just think if they can get him up to 5, it's going to make life not only easier for Jarrett Allen, but I think it actually might have the most positive effect on the guys in the backcourt in Darius and Donovan.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, more spacing on the floor for those two means more opportunities to cut to the basket, right? Like, and that's where Donovan thrives. I think in a lot of ways, that's where Darius thrives. Like Darius seemed to, when he was struggling in spurts this year, he seemed to find comfortability and kind of get in rhythm at times when he was able to just cut to the basket, make an easy layup. And then that would kind of spark him on being able to hit some threes too. So I think both those guys, are served to benefit from Mobley helping them space the floor a little bit more. And it kind of comes full circle. I also think too, like, look at all the other teams in the East that we saw improve themselves this offseason that are threats for Cleveland to have to go through. Look what they prioritized. Mikal Bridges goes to the Knicks. You get Paul George going to Philly because they had that max spot that they sort of saved for somebody this offseason, and they make it him. Like, these are more guys that are going to allow those teams to space the floor a little bit. And so that becomes something that the Cavaliers have to figure out now. Like, they can't just exist in this world where they have the two bigs. And I think that was an innovative idea at the time. And, we liked the potential of Mobley. And now we're 3 years in and we're like, okay, so we're asking these questions about, can he add that to his game? Because it seems like they have to just out of necessity. But that's the league now, right? Like, the league is spacing the floor, shooting threes, and the Cavs are missing that like one key guy that can help with that. So it serves to benefit everybody in this offense. And I think this is part of the reason why, listen, selfishly, I wanted to see them make some more trades and do some, wheeling a deal in this offseason and change some things up. But I also can understand where they're like, well, hey, before we do all that, we want to see what Kenny Atkinson can do with this group first. And if he can add that to Evan Mobley's game, okay, then maybe they're going somewhere and they have a chance to compete with the Knicks and the Sixers and the Celtics of the world.
And I will say, I do think it's interesting. And I'm not saying, because I'm with you as far as the trade stuff goes. I thought they would be more active on the trade market. Obviously, the only player that was not part of the roster last year that's part of the roster right now is Jalen Tyson. So they've not been a very active team. They've been probably the least active team in the NBA this year. But it's interesting they gave themselves a bit of an exit ramp with the Jared Allen contract extension. 1, that's a very team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
And 2, the fact that he signed it on August 2nd means he can be traded 4 days before the trade deadline. So if this doesn't go well, the Cavs have an avenue to get off of it. And I think that is something that is, I'm not saying they want to do that, but I just think it's a very interesting procedural thing that was done.
Yeah, it's a really good point because, and I brought up that as well on 92.3, the days after it happened, because Danny, like, we talk about the quarterback market in the NFL going up exponentially. The same thing's happening with the NBA salary cap, where it's going to explode these next couple of years because of this new TV contract. It's part of the reason why Donovan Mitchell signed the deal that he did with the player option in that third year on the extension, because he gets a chance to re-enter the market and make upwards of like $70 million a year, which is insane.
Crazy.
So,
It's
right.
nuts.
So like it's the same sort of thing, like we said, with the quarterback market, where the deals that the Cavs are signing now with Mobley, with Allen, even Donovan Mitchell to an extent right now, we know that'll change. They're team friendly and they're less cost, prohibitive, where if you get to a point where you decide we're going to move off of one of these guys, I'm not saying Mobley or Mitchell. I think Mobley and Mitchell are obviously the priority of guys you want to keep. But if they decide at some point, hey, we want to move off of Allen, even Garland, right? Like people are saying, well, who wants his contract? His contract is going to look pretty good to some team potentially if he comes out and has a good start to the season this year, because it's going to be less cost prohibitive to a team to trade for him with the way the salary cap is going. So yeah, all that stuff matters. The math on these things matters. And I do think it's kind of given them this runway where, hey, we have an exit plan or a way we can pivot if we need to, if things don't work out with just Kenny Atkinson coming in with some fresh perspective.
Yeah, I think that's all I think that's all just stuff that is worth bringing up. And as far as Garland goes, if he has a good year, which I'm buying stock in Darius Garland, he had a nightmare of a season, as well as I did.
Yeah.
But 2 years from now, Darius Garland's going to be probably in like the bottom half of starting point guards as far as how much money they're making. Like that's just because of the way the cap is going. That's how it's going to look. Maybe it doesn't look like the best contract in the world right now, and it's not. But 2 years from now, that contract is going to look perfectly fine. I mean, 3 years from now, when Jared Allen starts his extension, nothing. That deal is no big deal at all.
Yeah, I feel bad for Garland because, I mean, we're like 2-3 years removed from Steph Curry like raving about Darius Garland as like the next great point guard in this league, and him being an all-star, right? Like that, we all saw it. He was an all-star when the game was here in Cleveland. So I still think that player's in there. He had a lot of circumstances last year that cost him the season, his production. I think the jaw thing, I don't think people realize how difficult that was to have your jaw wired shut for as long as he did, like over a month, and you're eating food through a straw. He lost weight. Yeah, exactly. Like it's been a rough couple of years for him. And I do think on some level, some of his production is impacted by the fact that, he's playing next to Mitchell now, who's also a ball dominant guard. And we know that redundancy exists and some of the problems with that. I think they're trying the best they can. I don't fault him for, some of I don't fault him for some of the flaws in the building of this team if they can't coexist together. I still think he's a really good player. And whether he's with the Cavs or he ends up getting traded at some point, I hope he has success because, he was a guy that we were all very excited about and thought had a really bright future here in Cleveland before they made the Mitchell trade. And I still think that can be the path he takes. He can still be one of the better point guards in this league as long as he gets back on track. And I'm like you, hopeful that happens this year.
Couldn't agree more. Up next, we mentioned Donovan Mitchell. We mentioned what his future looks like. Want to talk about his future, but not with the Cavs. Ooh, what a tease. That's next right here on
That's
Locked
a good
On
one.
Cavs. So, Spencer, Donovan Mitchell had a tweet the other day. It was just the laughing emoji. And that tweet was about the 2028 Olympics. No, I'm not talking about Donovan Mitchell playing for an NBA team other than the Cavs. Talking about Donovan Mitchell potentially playing for Team USA when the Olympics roll around in 2028. The games will be in Los Angeles. Obviously, Team USA just won the gold medal this past weekend by defeating Team France, who I think has an incredibly bright future and is going to be a real challenge to Team USA in the future. But Donovan Mitchell quote tweeted, it was Legion Hoops. They put together a graphic of 9 NBA players that included Ja Morant, Jalen Brunson, Jalen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, Chet Holmgren, Zion Williamson, Cade Cunningham, Cooper Flagg, amongst others, and said, which players would you like to see join Team USA in the Olympics in 2028? Donovan Mitchell's picture obviously not included on there. I do think, you have to fast forward 4 years from now, and obviously we don't have crystal balls. We don't know what the NBA is going to look like. We don't know what Donovan Mitchell's career is going to look like, but he is someone that should still conceivably be in the prime of his career.
Yeah.
He'll be 31 years old. I think that an Olympic team is something that very well should be in his future.
I love this question so much. I actually, when I was watching that game against France unfold, and we all, I think, were enamored with the chance to finally see like Steph and LeBron play together in that capacity, and obviously
awesome.
KD was
so
part
cool,
of it.
Man.
Dude, I was glued to my TV for most of those games because there was just something so prideful about it, and it felt so cool to witness these three great players of our lifetime like playing on the same court. But I digress. But that thought came to mind, like this team is going to look very different in 2028 because I'm unless LeBron somehow finds a way to keep doing what he's doing till he's 43 years old, that would be obviously super remarkable. And he continues to push the envelope on that stuff.
I mean, he does. I cannot see him being.
Somebody put it out there though, because they were like, "Dude, it's in LA. He's gonna be," and I was like, maybe he tries to prolong it just for that." But no, if I had
to bet, those 2 weeks the Olympics are in LA, LeBron will either be on a tropical island somewhere or at his house in Akron. He'll either be in Northeast Ohio.
Like,
he will not be in Los Angeles because if you're not participating in the Olympics, the last place you're going to want to be is LA.
Yeah, you're right about that. The traffic is already bad out there. I can't imagine what it's going to be like during the Olympics. But no, so I think this really is like the last Olympics for LeBron, KD, probably Steph, I would imagine as well. And that was only the first time he'd done it because he'd been on so many finals runs that it was like he just never had the time. But I don't know. Maybe Steph can go back. We'll see. But
I mean, KD in 4 years, KD would be the age LeBron is right now. So I think of any of them, KD's the one. Like Steph would be 40.
Yeah.
I don't know, 40 at his size. Kevin Durant, just like as long as he's healthy, I think he's always going to be able to go get you 2 points whenever he wants. So maybe, but I do think there should be room for Donovan Mitchell on that team. I really do.
That was my long-winded way of getting to the point that I think Mitchell kind of is like that next man up. I mean, I thought he was sort of the next guy up when the news came out that Kawhi Leonard wasn't going to be on the team anymore. I was shocked that they went to Derek White because I kind of thought like the next tier was like Donovan, even Jaylen Brown. Like even Derek White's own Celtic teammate, I thought would have been next to sort of fight to take that roster spot. So I was kind of shocked by that. But I do think Mitchell falls into that category of like he'll be 31, like you said, still in the prime of his career. He feels like he's going to fit. He would fit for that group. And again, it's going to look a little bit different. I'm sure Anthony Edwards will be back and he'll be one of the focal points of this team. Maybe John Morant. I like that sort of suggestion. Zion's hard to project because he's so in and out of the lineup. He's going
to be in. His
health,
right.
His shit. Yeah, that one's tough. But listen, if Donovan Mitchell stays healthy, I think he should 100% be one of like the top people added to Team USA in 2028. I agree.
Yeah, and I think a big thing to watch for, not this year, not next year, but, start thinking about the 2026-27 season. Watch Donovan Mitchell's minutes then, because I do think part of the reason why he wasn't included is he did not play on the national team in, I believe it was the World Cup last summer. And a big part of the reason why he didn't do that was because he was playing a ton of minutes. Like he played almost 36 minutes a game for the Cavs that year, played 68 games plus the playoffs, and then had to come back this year and play 35 minutes a game in 55 games plus the playoffs, so he got injured. So I think that if his minutes were lower, he might have been more apt to play in the World Cup last year, and then maybe he's on the Olympic team this year. So, but I do think it's something to watch for. I think he's a guy that should deserve a spot on the Olympic team next time when we're talking about the Olympic Games. But Spencer, thank you so much for doing this. This was a blast. We'll have to have you on again soon. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, just at Spencito with a little underscore at the end. You see it at the bottom of the screen there on X, and I'm quite frequently on 92 The Fan. I usually host the Sunday show during the off season, 10 to 2, but that's coming to an end here pretty soon. Hopefully I get to hear from you guys around town. And Danny, I appreciate the invite, man. I hope we do get a chance to do this down the line. It's crazy to think, like, I know there's a lot going on with NFL training camp right now, but that also is kind of a signal that NBA training camp is not too far away. So we'll be right in the heart of the NBA season here soon enough.
Media day in the NBA is about a month and a half away. Basketball is closer than you know what I mean. We're going to get into player previews soon. I believe on tomorrow's show, I'm going to look back at some of the lineups the Cavs have used in the past and how Kenny Atkinson can make them better. We've got basketball real close, man. I cannot wait for it. But again, thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can check us out on YouTube, search Locked On Cavs, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe. Also, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere else. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.